Buongiorno. So I want to talk a little about these magical times in publishing we are going through right now. There's just a little hiccup. We have an 800-pound gorilla in the industry that completely dominates it. So when we started out Jelly Books, we thought, how do we avoid being completely squashed by this beast? And so we thought, where are the weak? Where can we do something better? One of the elements is discovery, because Amazon is a place you go to buy books cheaply, but very few people actually discover new books there. Amazon's very proprietary with its data, so we thought if we do an open data approach that pulls in a lot of third-party developers and other people, we could create a more interesting environment to do stuff. And we also thought, how can you sell books very, very differently, although I won't have enough time to really talk about that. But when we thought about discovery, we thought book discovery is not just one format. There are many, many different ways people discover book. Some are entirely serendipitous. Some are social, like word of mouth. Some are distributed in context because you read it inside a movie, inside of another book. Some are data-driven, so it's data that lets us discover book. Bestseller lists are one form, but a very crude form. And more, it's also very targeted, incentivized discovery. So let's look at a few of them. Almost exactly a year ago, we first launched jellybooks.com as an approach to do serendipitous discovery. So it was exclusively with book covers. No prices, no nothing else. You could really just scroll books for a few minutes when you had downtime until there was a cover that grabbed your attention, click on it, and the sole purpose was to get you to download the sample for later reading. Because if you read the sample, that's the best tool to get you hooked on the book. Now, some people are impulsive, so after some feedback, we added a buy button, mostly for men, it turned out. But all of this gives us data to track what people are interested in. We then moved on to social discovery, where we tried to make it easier and more engaging how people share books online. Be it on Twitter, so inside a tweet that you would see the cover, the synopsis, the author, with something called a Twitter card. But the same on Facebook, on Pinterest, on Tumblr. How do you make people react to something when someone talks about the book and shares the book? Oh, sorry, I was one too slow here. Cherry was the next project. Because we are Jelly Books, we give all our projects jelly flavor names. Distributed discovery. So we then took our back end of cloud hosting ebook samples and all the social markup and all the tools we had done and started pushing them out as tools and widgets and buttons to publishers. So if they need to host samples on their own website, or if their author wants a sample on his website, the reviewer, they can use all these tools, including the social media markup, as part of their social media strategy and to better talk about their own book. And we track who downloads it, which channel is effective, what time of day. That brings me to now Project Elderberry, which is all around data and a more systematic approach to data analysis. The UK Technology Strategy Board is funding us on this one. And the background here is, traditionally we think about books as a hardcover, paperback, or an ebook file, a container. But increasingly, a book is really just a link. This could be the Amazon product page, it could be a Google bibliographical page, it could be our own links, it could be a quote that's been pulled out with ReadMill. They're all just links, but they always refer to a book and a unique ISBN. And these links, when people share them on Twitter, on Facebook, can be tracked. So we might not be able to get Amazon sales pages, sales data, but we can see how people are talking about books on Amazon when they link to those pages. That's trackable for us. But it's terribly, terribly messy. Different APIs, different structures, different Onyx markups. Most developers outside of publishing can't bother with the data cleanup of this messy metadata we have. So what we do at Jelly Books in this project is we retrieve, store, clean up, unify it to create a completely clean data structure of how books and book links are shared through social networks. And we then put that out as an API so that third-party developers, people in machine learning, in data visualization, can have fun on algorithms and not on data cleanup and create new tools around it. But it's also publishers can pull their own data and data of competitors in and do comparisons and analysis in-house with a very clean and structured data set. Of course, we also use it ourselves. Our own focus on this data is who reads what? Can we understand what people sample, what they're sharing, what they're talking about? The philosophy is not what do people tell us they read, can we watch what they're really doing so that they cannot pretend to only read highbrow but all read romance novels. We're also very interested in figuring out how people influence each other. Am I influential in a particular category and other people will download a sample if I talk about the book? And in reverse, what kind of people influence Edna Vodka and make him download a book and sample and ultimately buy a book? The goal is, how if you publish a book, do we find an audience for that book? Either by identifying directly who the potential readers are, or identifying the influencers who, if they talk about the book, will find an audience and attract others to try it. That brings us to the business model. The first three parts, social, serendipitous discovery, and distributed discovery, all the tools are free. Anyone can participate, submit their titles into the Jelly Factory, which is our back end. It's basically a cloud hosting of ebook samples. Where we make money is if we structure data-driven promotions and data-driven giveaways or any form of analytics, but mostly we try to link it back to sales on behalf of the publisher, and there we take a small cut on the commission on it. We're still a pretty small team. We're about 8 people out of London, 2 years old, been live for a year. Small means we can be relatively fast. We've got now about a few dozen publishers on the platform and 35,000 books, and continuously innovating. And I've set my challenge to be the first speaker who actually gets a question from the audience today. So who's asking first? Anybody? Somebody? On Italiano? Okay.
So, if you come with me, one of the questions is that one of the advantages you're saying is that when you pointed out where you make money, it's by helping with promotions and using analytics, essentially to streamline marketing efforts.
Yep.
Is that, do you feel that, has that been an effective tool for publishers? Are there examples that you can cite where this has worked?
Well, some of it we are yet to launch, so some of it has been still very much in the beta phase and trying out. I think part of the background is my learning, both when I was a texter beforehand and in 2 years at Jellybox. There is no market for selling data or analytics to publishers. Publishers don't buy IT, so if you have an enterprise software that costs a few $1,000s, there's maybe 10 publishers in the world who might consider buying it or subscribing it. So it's a very difficult prospect, but we found if we can use data and pour it into a format that a publisher understands, it's like how to promote this book or how to kind of run a dedicated promotion.
Yes.
It's something they can more readily buy into, and you can find a business model that works within a traditional format.
So when you ingest the data into Jelly Factory or you ingest these samples and you guys clean up this, that's why you have the several different product lines.
So we actually take in the master files from publishers and create our own samples so that we have them in Mobi files for Amazon. But we also put links at the end of all the files so that Amazon can strip them out, and we can track if someone reaches the last page, do they then go to share on or buy it from the last page. And all that data we put out through an API so that everyone can then structure the data in their own way. Because the other thing we found is when we asked publishers, what data do you want and how do you want it, we got no answer. So we say, here's the raw data, figure out exactly how you want it presented and have your own in-house guys have fun with it.
And I suppose the last question is, if there was one question that you want publishers to ask you, what would that be? I mean, because certainly one of the issues with technology is technologists often complain that people come to them with the wrong problems, or they're asking the wrong question. What's the one right question publishers should be asking you for a solution? I put him on the spot, so.
Well, you highlighted the why, and I think publishers should ask more themselves, what is the right question of how do I leverage data and tools? Today, most publishers' digital strategy is how do I supply the 4 biggies, and think about what are the new opportunities, how can I use third-party stuff in an intelligent, and then from that, come with questions. When I meet publishers, they always listen, but they really rarely ask you any question, and sometimes any question is better than no question.
Hello, everybody. I'm Giorgio Lupi. I'm the co-founder and designer at Accurate, which is an Italian information design company. And I'm very happy to be here today to introduce you Please, which I'd like to start off by saying that is not really a startup as normally conceived. And by saying that, I mean that Please is a more compound project we are developing within a team that you'll see later on. And a world we are exploring through several experiments we are carrying on, a world that basically tries to relate stories, emotions, and places. So, as a very quick introduction, I would like to lead you think about physical places as palimpsest, as they always have been. So imagine that multiple stories of different kind are always overlapping on the same maps, on the same cities, and on the same parts of these cities. And so even if the virtual space had initially been conceived as something like an alternative to the physical world, we now everybody know, and we have always been seeing before this morning, that any virtual connection and virtual spaces such as any app we can browse on our iPhone can be conceived as something like an additional layer of function and access that maps onto the physical spaces. So the digital and the physical, we can say that are merging more and more, overlapping and enriching each other more and more. And so in this sense, we like to talk about places as novel points or places for publishing and reading our stories into. And with stories, I can intend our memories, our messages, or our thoughts and our emotions. And this is done to keep these stories and explore them later, to share these stories with people we love, because we know that human beings always wanted to leave traces on places, because we tell stories to mark places in a way, and also we mark places to tell stories. And from the other side, and this is something that we are very interested in, more and more companies and organizations need georeferenced information about their users or about their potential clients to understand their habits, to highlight those habits, and to intercept trends and behaviors they may want to leverage. And now, as we see, the existent geolocalizations-based applications such as Foursquare are not really able to satisfy this big need. Are not really able to enlighten those habits and intangible feelings that we feel when we are in places. And so our main question is it possible to draw evolving maps full of meaningful contents provided by people living and experiencing places? And moreover, is it possible to provide people with the possibility to literally write their emotions and paths on maps and then return interpreted meaningful data to the companies and the organizations that are actually struggling for them? And is it also possible to do it in an emotional way, building something like immersive and narrative experiences of physical and digital creation and navigations of stories in places? We are trying to do it.
I'm Marta and I'm 15. I live in a small village near Milan. I love my places and I want to remember them and to let other people know how and why I love them. I want to leave my mark on them without spoiling them. Please is a way to write on places without ruining them. It is a way to read places through other people's stories. I'm Marta and I'm 15. I want to come back here in 20 years' time and find something that was important to me. I want to discover a new place, through the stories of people who live it, enjoy it, and love it.
So, Plains is a tool to discover stories, journeys, and products told starting from the places that you and your friends are in when you launch this application. So what really matters is not geography or proximities, but narrations related to these geographies. And to us, geolocalization stories may include suggestions for tryouts and purchases, provided that they are related to the narration and to the emotional context. So Please is a word that we are beginning to explore through this application that now I'm briefly introducing you, that will be hopefully a social network but still is not. And we can describe it in a couple of words as a publishing tool, leading you to record and share your emotional stories on places that you're feeling this emotion in. As feelings are not really quantifiable, as we know, as feelings are something like instinctive, and as feeling nothing really deals with numbers and sequential operations, we try to design a very emotional interface with this kind of aesthetic gestures that should enhance and foster the willing to actually use it. We'd like to think about Plains not as a check-in app. Plains is not only about dropping bookmarks on a map. You simply throw a heart within our application, and it's a very gesture of throwing a heart. It falls on the map, exactly recognizing where you are. You can then choose which kind of heart just landed on your map. Is it about love? Is it about passion? Is your heart a broken one? And you can then, if you want, dedicate your heart to anyone and add your own message, or just keep it for yourself to record your emotion. And then, of course, you can explore and where and when your hearts have been beating. We see a strong parallel with narratives, with book that we love to be immersed in. And so books are making us feel emotions indeed, and places we read books are filled with our emotions. And another way I can try to describe our approach is that, as everybody knows, now we can buy books wherever, so we don't really need to go to a bookstore, as we've been talking this morning. And places we are, so if we are on a seaside on vacation, or if we're waiting for a plane, or if we are at home, and so situations and I would say emotion we are in can definitely influence the kind of books and the stories we would like to be immersed in. And this is our main idea. So to come to our business model, let's say, so the market we merely refer to are editors, the tourism industry, and the entertainment industry. And at this stage of the project, Plains is still an experimental platform, and not only the app that we presented before. So a series of experiments we are carrying on geo-referenced informations while we are waiting to get a critical mass of users to test how these users are actually throwing their heart and their emotion on our maps. And while a more consistent version of the application has been developing, trying to find the algorithms between the kind of contents people share and the geography. And we finally envision a business model based on monitoring and trading marketing insights on data we retrieve and analyze. And the lighter market we are beginning to explore as a starting point is also providing people with actual products able to remind their emotional trips they selected love in. So Plains is a project ideated by Filippo Pretolani and Mafe De Baghis, who are here in the first line, and I really invite you all to reach out to them while the lunch break. And with Gabriele Rossi and me as Accurate, we designed the interface and the interaction experience, and also with Paolo Faustini and Alessio Bragadini. And then to conclude, we don't really have any certainty at this moment. We believe that there will be room in the near future for what is called personal publishing and personal publishing related to places. And our aim right now is to validate this idea that we have in mind that could be described as a place, as a marketplace for location-related stories, for location-related contents, goods, experiences that strongly deals with emotions. And now the application that I've been describing, we just delivered for iOS 6. It's called Plain Light, and it has only these limited functionalities that I presented, but in the meantime, we are dreaming of endless possibilities for our project.
Do we have any questions? Does anybody want to ask a question of Georgia? The question is there a Facebook integration with this? And that's exactly what I was curious about, is how does this integrate with all of our other social media tools, which are often very emotional?
Okay, so as I was saying before, the project is in a very early stage, and so of course we are planning to integrate eventually, when this tool will become hopefully a social network, our application with the existing social network. But the idea right now is that we are just testing how people use this launching of hearts, how they are feeling the maps with their emotions. So the first stage of our project is a very bottom-up one, and we're really just testing which kind of contents people are willing to put on their map. And this to see how this could be potentially be interesting for editors and publishers. And
so I could have this is a very loving map. If I was heartbroken and angry, I could have an angry map too, or sad, or...
But actually, I feel that we were discussing it before, so probably we will be finding more broken heart rather than a very passionate heart on our maps.
But it's very interesting, because studies on social media, there's a New York Times article today, talk about how our propensity to share is we tend to share much more positive news than we do negative news. So it's obvious that you're on the right track. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi all. Thanks to Marco and Marco to invite me to Milan. It's actually the third IfbookThen for me, and I really love Milan very much. So I'm going to talk about my new project, which is called Monitor and the Trade Impact Factor. Well, and we're going to take a ride on the data bus, and in the couple of next slides, I will be showing you some data points that publishers would or should be interested, the focus of Monitor and my project, but also has been not only what data would be interesting for publishers, but as well what online publishing data might be relevant to retailers as well. And I will come back to this interrelation at the end of the few slides. So, of course, publishers have a look at the monthly sales reports that they receive mainly on a monthly or quarterly terms from the retailers, because they are basis for the accounting and the royalty settlement with the authors. But at least for the German market, I can say that more and more retailers start offering daily or even real-time sales trends back to the publishers that can be used to indicate sales that have been yesterday or in very on the same day, even if the publisher, for instance, has his own shop running, so they get real-time information. And of course, why shouldn't publishers be offered daily sales trends? That's not a question to me that they should. Interesting as well is to track the reviews that are written on professional or non-professional websites and blogs, because it can indicate how titles will be discussed in the future, and maybe even in the actual customer reviews that that you will find in stores on review sites like Goodreads or Lovely Weekly Books in Germany, or social reading platforms where you also have detailed customer reviews that tell publishers what readers actually think. Interesting data is, of course, the number of library landings for certain titles, the number of reads on subscription services like we heard from Scooby or 24 Symbols, or the number of reads on social reading platforms like ReadMill that has been mentioned a couple of times already today. And we also already talked about in-book tracking that can track reading habits and can provide very specific information on how the user is interacting with the content of the publisher. One of the most viewed data points, I'd say, is of course the sales rank. So it's being tracked by authors and publishers as well. And of course, ebook charts and top 100 lists are always fun to watch. And I think it's a good means for engaging users with these kind of with the titles that are trending. So they are actually the most important data point right at the moment for many publishers. But we also have some the buzz that is created on social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter. Ed, you mentioned what amazing amount of data is produced, and it would be interesting to find out and what is called sentiment analysis, what users that tweet about certain titles think and how they value the content they are tweeting about, and to track it and not only use it as a kind of alerting service for publishers that something is going on around their titles, but also try to find out more about these small messages that occur around the content. We have classic analytics that come from e-commerce, like referrals, incoming URLs. Andrew, you spoke about it, or the upselling rates that you can track how many readers of samples actually buy the content. That's definitely what Jellybook has or is doing an amazing job to offer these kind of information. And that could also tell you information about the user segmentation or what else is in a shopping basket when users buy a book title or ebook title. Many of the publishers also have, of course, a look at the number of page impressions of their blogs and websites, and a number of followers, likes, subscribers on their fan pages on Facebook, etc. And they provide this information in their retail communication to the stores and provide it to the retailers. And other aspects where you have, for instance, like dates of certain marketing campaigns or a specific budget that publishers put in to Google AdWords or Facebook ads. The question that we pose at Monitor is, there's so many data and so many information that you could collect. What are we going to do with all this? And there's the answer. One answer is to answer a specific and relevant question. So not just display everything you can assemble, all data points, but try to find out. You mentioned it in the questions and answers sessions with Andrew. So what are the questions that publishers need to know in order to use the data? And the other thing that I would like to introduce introduce what we're going to do with data that we collect in this project, I would like to call the trade impact factor. Which is an experiment to find a measure of trending titles and their social impacts. So it's actual real sales data, sales information from the day before, combined with context information that generate the trade impact factor. And we will have the shops that will provide sales trends and other data back to the publishers. And on the other hand, we have data that publishers collect, or we collect for publishers, that will be offered to the retailers. And so it's our main company goal to introduce an infrastructure for the mutual exchange of data between the publishers and the real retailers. So not only in one direction, in two directions, to optimize data-driven retail marketing and distribution. We started with a project in last September and will be founding the company next month with me, a co-founder and a strategic investor that we found. Well, that was it. Thanks for the attention.
Just as we set up, Sebastian, I have two questions for you. What is the risk I brought it up, and a lot of people have brought up the fact that retailers and the large retailers, Amazon, Apple, very big in Germany, are supplying data back, and the German book industry will supply data back. But we've seen in the past month, for example, Amazon radically change their affiliate program. What's the risk that somebody just turns off that valve? In like a drug dealer, here's a little sample, we get you addicted to it. Maybe we start charging you for this. Maybe we just shut this off because we realize the value of this is allowing you to compete with us in a funny way. We'll talk about this particularly with direct-to-consumer sales. Is there a risk of that? Is that a fear?
Well, I think that publishers themselves need to understand what importance the data, what important role the data play that they can collect themselves,
okay.
And the data that they get from their sales reports. So in combination of these data, they have quite a standing also to offer something to the retailers. At least that's our assumption, and we have had some interesting talks with publishers and retailers trying to introduce this model of exchanging data, and some retailers, of course, will be more reserved and others will be more open to this kind of exchange of data versus data, but I can see progress in this.
Okay. And somebody asked me, but they didn't want to identify themselves in the audience. They wanted to know about the name Publishing Hurts. Is that a German thing? Pleasure and pain together?
No, it's not. It's not. Publishing Hurts is actually this company which will provide this tool monitor will be called Publishing Data Networks, but it's I don't want to push it forward. Publishing Hurts actually is a name of the blog where I occasionally provide some comments on the current publishing.
Now you have your answer.
So have a look at the blog. I will explain the name. So I mean, there's a lot of pain and a lot of passion involved in publishing these days, and that was the idea to comment on.
Exactly,
on this. So,
it is a German thing.
So, and it's also about love and pain, so and broken hearts and stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone. With Katmaier not here, I know I'm the last slot before lunch, so I will do my best to keep to time and keep through quickly so you can get off without delay. As Ed said, I work at The Guardian. I work at Guardian Books. Guardian Books is based here in the newspaper offices of The Guardian and The Observer, which is located here in King's Cross. in London, which used to be a very nefarious and rather dangerous area of London, is now very nice and shiny. That is roughly the size of The Guardian to no particular scale, but I wanted to show you that Guardian Books is a very small part of the newspaper, and that definitely isn't to scale because we're much smaller than that. But what this does mean, and where this places us in quite an interesting position as a small book publisher, is that we have three really important points of access. We have access to some very good writers, a number of whom are employed by the newspaper. We have access to an awful lot of readers. They're just some sort of key headline figures. There's about 30 million people coming through the website every month. In the big news events, US elections, Olympics, that goes up to about 70 million. And that's global. Print circulation, 215,000. And then there's the social networks. And we run a bookshop as well, which has got tens of thousands of customers. And behind all of this audience, we have a lot of data. There's really two sort of key areas of data. There's behavioral data from how people use the website, and also some of the other sort of online platforms that the newspaper is published to. And we have information on sort of, both what people like reading, but also there's engagement metrics to see how they are keying in with different subjects, what it is they like about different subjects, how they sort of, move around the site, how they come to the site, and so on and so forth. And we try and use this from a book publishing point of view to inform our editorial decision-making, especially when it comes, as Ed said, to publishing our instant books, which we have a series called Guardian Shorts, which I will get onto in just a second. The other important piece of data we have is some quantitative audience data about from everything from where they're based through to what type of reading devices they have, how much they want to pay for different bits of content, which, as I'm sure you know, with a free website is often not all that much. And sort of what, sort of how they're, I've already said what kind of reading devices they have. We've been using this data for quite a long time. It's growing increasingly sophisticated, the number of measurements, data points that we have, and the way in which it's analysed. But as far back as, I think this one was published in 2007, this was sort of the early days of using data to inform our editorial decisions, just by looking at what was popular. And this was a printed full-colour book. If you're not sure what wild swimming is, it's swimming in places like this, which is in the middle of England and is incredibly cold, but there are tens of thousands of families in the UK who like doing it. So what we've tried to do with the Guardian Shorts programme is to get data to tell us just a little bit more of a detailed story about what the audience likes, and then to try and factor that into our editorial commissioning. So as well as asking, sort of what it is that people are interested in, so we know they're interested in swimming in incredibly cold, murky green water, we want to know why. But we also want to know, who these people are and how are they behaving, and how can we take those sort of four key plot elements and use that to publish titles that we know they're going to like. So it's very much sort of what subject area should we focus on and what should this content be, and then also we have the more sort of traditional marketing sales type analysis. How big is this potential audience? Who are they? And whereabouts can we reach them? I just want to speak briefly to sort of take you through how we identify a subject area. This is sort of the headline points only. It's a slightly lengthier process than this when we go about doing so. But we have identified here, I've circled some of the most popular areas on the website, news and sport, culture, travel and technology, and we've developed books in all of these areas. I'm going to draw out one of these to talk about in a little more detail, and that's Facts Are Sacred. All the other books, which you can now see blurred out, when we started this program just over a year ago, coming up to about a year and a half ago, we went very much for the instant publishing idea of using the Guardian's and the Observer's archive. The very first book we published was about phone hacking. There was a big scandal in the UK about a certain group of newspapers illegally breaking into voicemails of celebrities and victims of crime. And it's going through sort of a massive sort of political debate at the moment about press regulation. And that was put together using the articles that The Guardian had published. The Guardian were the ones who broke that story. And we have an archive that goes back to the 1790s, so there's a lot of content in there. What we noticed as we published more and more, we got up to about 50 titles. There were some archive-based ones which sold very well. And then as we moved away from, I guess, the headline topics and into some of the more niche areas, although we still had data backing up our editorial decision-making, the sales were not so high. But on original titles, where we were taking that data, identifying the subject area, and then commissioning original writing to that, it all operates within a sort of fairly short length of up to about 20,000 words. The returns were much more promising. So Facts Are Sacred was one of the very first original titles that we did. It's about data journalism. Data journalists do things like this. They also, which is a map made out of chocolate to show the biggest chocolate importers and exporters in the world. Italy is number 10 in terms of importing. They also analyze things like the WikiLeaks files. So we knew that the data journalism in the paper was a hugely popular area. There's a special section for it on the website, which has about 1 million monthly viewers. It's called the Data Blog. But we didn't just want to identify, sort of what was interesting. We were going to commission this book. We were going to commission new writing for it. We wanted to be able to say what that content should be. So we looked, we measured, what it was that people were interested in the data blog. With 1 million monthly viewers and there's an awful lot of content on there, could we extrapolate from that a sense of how a book about it might be structured? So we looked at where the highest areas of engagement were, other metrics fed into that, sort of especially in terms of how people would go from a headline story. We always offer the data behind that, explanation, analysis, and so on, and sort of where the interest levels were around that. And we sort of bit by bit built up a series of 8 chapters that we felt covered each of the behavioral indications that we were seeing. And then we commissioned the book. It's written by an author called Simon Rogers, who is the editor of the data blog, so is very well positioned to use it. And then we went about sort of making sure that this was a commercially viable proposition. As I said, there are 1 million users of the data blog. Now, what follows is a very sort of quick how we broke that down to reach what we felt was a pretty modest number, and hopefully that we would be able to achieve with our sales. Now, we measured 10% of those million of what we called engaged users, and we brought in our knowledge about people owning e-reading devices and so on, and 23% of our audience do. So we had 23,000 that we felt that we could aim for. Of that, 78% were based in the UK and the US, and they remain, all our books are English language only, and they remain the 2 biggest markets. So we sort of focused in on them. And then we had done some market research into our audience, and 27% had reported back that they would be interested in reading short-form non-fiction. That gave us a relatively small number, but we knew from some experience of publishing previous titles that only about half the sales that we make come from sort of within the core Guardian readership. So we were able to double it. And we've sold, so far, we've sold 7,000 copies. That book is now no longer available for sale because we are taking it into different editions and formats. So that's sort of, it's had its lifespan. And for something that we were aiming to be modest, achievable, did this prove what we were doing? Did it work? We were very, very pleased with the number. And I just want to give you a sense of just sort of how this breaks down in terms of the business model. All our books are priced at £1.99. And we pay our authors. They do have an advance, although it's a very low one. It's £1,000, which breaks down into 2 payments, 500 on publication, 500 once we hit a certain sales target, and they get a 50-50 split of the revenues. I can see 10 minutes on the clock, and Ed there, so I will very quickly say that for us was very much a proof of concept as well as making us some money, and it's something that we have taken into a hardback illustrated book, and also not wanting to use the word enhanced, for something that's all about data graphics and interactives, a more appropriate ebook being developed for the iPad, published next month. And very finally, just want to say that at the center of all of this, the term instant publishing means different things in different cases. Obviously now we're commissioning new content. It's not quite as instant as it was using archive content. But after the analysis of that data, and indeed during sort of working alongside the data specialists, it's the editor who sits at the heart of it all, still makes those decisions, but everything they do and everything I do is informed by the data that we have coming back in from the website. Experiment continues, it's everywhere. And a few points to take away. Thank you.
Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask Nick about their project? Well, it's an interesting correlation because you have both the data and as the publisher, you're supplying the what and the why for yourself.
Yes.
It's kind of an interesting echo, I think.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the most important thing that we do, and it's on the previous slide, and it's been mentioned before, it's all about the questions that you ask that data as a publisher. It's very much, if you want to use data, if you want to get something out of it, it's about asking the why. It's about interrogating it until you find the right ways to use it. It doesn't do anything by itself.
It'll just sit there until you know.
Exactly, looking big and scary and full of numbers.
Well, as a publisher who, when you were initially confronted with this project or this ambition, what do you think was the best question that you were able to conceive of when approaching this?
It was very much, why are people reading what they're reading? I mean, it is that why question. We saw what they were reading. That had always been informing what we did. What we wanted to know next was, why was this happening? The step beyond that was, how do we then deliver it to people?
So once you ask the why, then you can come up with the answers about what and how and everything else.
Absolutely. They all fit together.
And did you ever figure out why people like swimming in those bogs?
No, I've tried it myself. In that very one I showed, I've got no idea.
The English, they're crazy.